Well, hello everyone. Dr. Jerry Duggar here. Welcome to the Simple 7 Lifestyle Podcast, another episode for you today. I think this one will be really enlightening for you. In fact, we're going to shine some light on a topic that a lot of people are talking about and learning more about, and that has to do with the benefits of red light therapy and infrared light therapy. So before we dive into the details there, I want to put this in the right framework first. You know, for centuries, medical science is trying to advance and trying to understand all the different ways we can interact with the body and prevent and treat disease. And we've become very, very enamored with the idea that we can find silver bullets, find single solutions, and that diseases are often caused by single entities. And this was a great idea when we were dealing with people dying from infectious bacterial diseases, right? And so the success we had with finding antibiotic treatments for infections that would take people down obviously changed the landscape of all civilization. And it became very easy for us to think that we were going to solve all disease that way. Instead, it turns out that the main killers today are diabetes and heart disease and cancer and stroke and autoimmune issues and Alzheimer's. These are multifactorial, and they require a more holistic, multifactorial approach to treatment. And there's no way a drug is going to affect all of the different elements that are going on in these disease states. That's not to say that, there's no chance for a medication to help. Of course, there could be solutions that come from some great pharmaceutical intervention. But lifestyle-driven, functional medicine views the body as a holistic, integrated system, and our entire approach looks for all of these factors that are having an impact on the way the system regulates itself. And so this new model, this kind of functional medicine model that I talk about all of the time on this podcast, is helping us refocus on the environmental inputs that we put into our body. Everything from sleep to movement to our diet to our thought processes, all of the things we talk about in the Simple 7. These are environmental inputs that wash over our genes and cause our state of health to be either high or low. And it's really amazing when we get to these really basic, fundamental environmental inputs. When we learn to harness those correctly, they have broad body implications. So instead of one treatment for one single biochemical glitch that might be happening, we end up with a single intervention that has broad effect over multiple organs and systems and tends to push the body into a state of better homeostasis or balance. So that framework I wanted just to have in your mind as we talk about the emergence of light therapy using specific frequencies or wavelengths of light in a therapeutic way for the body. There's a big fancy word for this in the literature called photobiomodulation. Okay? Photo meaning, light or photon energy. Bio, of course, meaning the body or biological system. And modulation. So the way that photons modulate biological systems. All right? So, of course, there's no way that we could be alive on this planet without the electromagnetic spectrum of light, both the visible and the invisible. It's all part of our universe. Without the sun and all of the spectrum of light that it gives off and the heat that it gives off, we wouldn't be here. So without having to take you back to your first primer in science, I think you can all agree that sunlight is essential for life. And it turns out that every part of that light has a benefit. Some have some negative elements to them, but viewed in total, they are all bioactive. They all stimulate biological systems. So most people are aware of the sun's UV or ultraviolet rays. They stimulate our skin to create vitamin D, which is an incredibly important pro-hormone that affects our immune system and our brain and our musculoskeletal system. So we know that ultraviolet rays even have beneficial impact. Of course, they can be damaging as well when we don't have protection against them. And that's maybe a podcast for another day where we talk about the benefits versus the challenges of ultraviolet. But there's other wavelengths of light that are also included in this full spectrum. Blue light is really important for triggering our circadian clock, our biological clock, our sleep-wake cycles. Blue light is very stimulatory to the body. It helps to raise cortisol and awaken our body for the day. Blue light at night, therefore, is sending the wrong message, the wrong signal. And in nature, there really is no blue light at night, but we've artificially figured out a way to create that, which is causing some problems. And I think we've talked about that in previous podcasts. But so we got blue light that has some beneficial effects. We have ultraviolet, which I've already mentioned, triggering the production of vitamin D on our skin. So we also have what's called far infrared, and far infrared has an ability to heat our body up. This is what produces a lot of the heat that we're getting from the sun. And this stimulates changes in cell function as well, including circulation. So red light, which we're going to talk about mostly today, has most of its effect on the mitochondria inside of our cells. Now, if you remember, the mitochondria are energy production factories. And so they help us produce ATP, which is the fuel that our cells run on. And even near infrared, if you want more information on all of the benefits of different spectrums of light, I would send you to one of my mentors' websites called theenergyblueprint.com. Ari Witten is his name, and he is an expert on light therapy. Great resources on his website. So let's talk about this red light therapy stuff. You're seeing it all over the place. It's like the new kid on the block, and for good reason, right? Currently, there are over 3,000 peer-reviewed scientific studies highlighting the benefits or the positive impacts of this wavelength of light. Well, actually, a band of wavelengths of light. It turns out that our cells have a lot of different mechanisms by which they can turn specific wavelengths of light into cellular energy. And we've learned that these have really predictable effects on our biological tissues. Let's cover those. Number one, red and near-infrared light have been shown to improve skin health. They increase collagen production, and that can lessen the appearance of wrinkles and lighten sun-damaged skin and even lower localized inflammation associated with acne or psoriasis. So red light therapy can be very beneficial for the skin. It can also lower inflammation and pain. It turns out that red and near-infrared light cause local releases of endorphins, or local pain-killing chemicals that our body makes. So it can lower inflammation and lower pain perception. This is an amazing therapy for treating musculoskeletal injuries, fibromyalgia, and other kind of chronic pain issues. All right, I already mentioned the way these things work is by improving cellular energy. So we can improve the function of our mitochondria. And if our cells are working better, they repair better and they grow better. Because of this functional improvement in the cells, it can speed the healing of soft tissues like muscles and ligaments and tendons, as well as even affecting bone recovery. So research even shows that red and near-infrared light can help with fat loss. When our fat cells are exposed to these frequencies of light, it causes a temporary alteration in their membrane. It causes some permeability of the membrane of the cell, and the cells can empty out and lose some of the fat that they have inside of them. That goes into the space in between the cells called the interstitial space, where it's believed that that's taken up by the lymphatic system and moved into circulation, where that fat can be burned and used. So many people are using red light therapy and infrared light therapy to promote some toning and some improvements in body composition and the way the body looks. and add to that the tightening of the skin by more collagen production, and you can see how the beauty industry, the aesthetic industry, and the weight loss industry are, loving this idea of using red light therapy as part of an overall approach. Okay, so what about brain health? Is there any research on improvements in brain function with red light therapy? The challenge with that is that it's difficult to get the red light or the light frequencies through hard bones, right, into the brain. But we can do it. And there are even ways to kind of get access, like through the ear, through the nose, where there's less bony interference, so that different frequencies or different strengths of light can penetrate into the brain. But we're seeing that it improves short-term memory, attention span, and even some benefit in anxiety and depression. Okay, so that's cool. So there's brain effects. What about hormones? Millions of people suffer from diabetes, and one of the main long-term kind of outcomes for those people are poor circulation to the feet and ulcers of the feet. So red and near-infrared light can not only improve circulation, but specifically can help with peripheral neuropathy and damage to these tissues. So in addition to kind of the effects of blood sugar and insulin, red light therapy can also help the body regulate cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and even some research showing that it can increase testosterone. So, all right, there's a lot of benefits through a lot of different systems because of the nature of how this light affects the cells. So what's the best type of device? How should we be getting red light therapy? Well, of course, I recommend we get all the different spectrums of light on our body in a safe dose. So that means being outside, being out in nature. That's obviously the best way to get all of these. But we can target red and near-infrared light to be used therapeutically. And so there are several different devices and approaches to do this. So I want to go over this a little bit. This won't be an exhaustive dive into all of the physics going on here, but let's talk about a few pieces of the puzzle. I'll try to keep it somewhat simple. So we have a few parameters to think about, namely wavelength, power, and treatment time. Okay? So just think about trying to manipulate those three things. So different devices have different wavelengths that they produce. Even within the spectrum of red, there's a wide diversity of wavelengths that can be called red light. The least expensive diodes are 635 nanometers, and that's very effective. But some people think that 650 to 685 might be a little bit more therapeutic. Anyway, so there's some devices that are 635, some that are 685. Okay, as I mentioned before, beyond the red, we get into an invisible part of the spectrum called near infrared. And those wavelengths go up a little bit higher. So we start getting into the 850 nanometer length. And just know that different devices that you buy are going to be calibrated to produce different wavelengths. And those wavelengths do matter. It's going to have a different effect on the body. All right, so once we have the right wavelength of light, we've got to get the right power that's pushing that light. And that power is measured in milliwatts or watts. Generally, the higher the power, the more depth of penetration you're going to get. So when we're trying to penetrate deep into the body, we want to use a more powerful laser or a LED that will push that photon deeper into the tissue. And also the wavelength has an impact on this. So, maybe for reference, a little laser pointer that you've used maybe to show a presentation on a slide at the front of a class or something like that. A little laser pointer is usually 635 nanometers, and it's maybe 5 milliwatts. So it's very, very low power and obviously basically completely safe. That's the same idea with like the little scanners at the grocery store that are reading barcodes. Okay, this is what we call a class 1 laser. Very safe. I mean, you don't want to stare at it in your eyeballs, but, temporarily looking at that light isn't going to cause any problem because it's not very powerful. So then we get up to where we're pushing that light a little bit more powerfully. And we get into other types of classes of laser, a class 2 laser, like this one that I've got here. For those who are watching on YouTube, you'll see this little flashlight LED device is cranking out 191 milliwatts. So once again, relatively low power, but definitely powerful enough to penetrate into the tissues and to create some beneficial effect there. So I've talked about kind of class 1 lasers are super weak, class 2 lasers that get a little bit stronger, and then we get into class 3 lasers, and those are often called cold lasers or low-level lasers, and those are really the ones that typically show up in clinical settings. So here's a class 3 laser. This is what's called a super pulse laser. Now it's kind of pulsing the red light, but actually the pulse is happening a lot faster. It's on every 100 milliseconds the pulse is happening. So this blinking light is almost just kind of to tell you that the device is on. The pulsing is happening much, much faster. But this laser has 25 watts or 25,000 milliwatts. But because it's pulsing on and off, it doesn't have the effect of heating up your tissues. The higher the wattage of the laser or light emitting diode or LED, the more heat is created and the more potential danger is there. So we get into class 4 lasers for therapeutic effect. These have to be continuously sweeping or moving over the tissue, or it could cause damage, it could cause burns. And we all know that then there's even more powerful lasers that are used for hair removal or for even cutting and surgery and cauterizing things. So obviously we just keep pushing the intensity of the laser higher and higher and higher. Eventually it becomes damaging and destroys tissue. When we use it at the lower power ranges, it's stimulatory and healing. This idea of a little bit of something being beneficial, but too much of something being harmful. This is the idea of hormesis, or this beneficial stress. And so red light therapy is kind of a hormetic or beneficial stress on the body, and it promotes repair. Okay, so there are a lot of different devices out there on the market. In fact, there's even devices where they hang on the wall, and there's different light emitting diodes that are producing these wavelengths of light. So I probably ought to explain the difference between a laser and an LED, because this also comes into the discussion. Both lasers and LEDs can produce the same wavelengths. But what's happening with a laser is that there are specific optical properties that push all of the wavelengths to be in perfect alignment with each other. They call this coherence. So it creates a coherent light where all of the wavelengths are lined up so that there's a beam that penetrates with all of the power going in one specific direction. That's why a laser pointer works as a pointer across a large distance, is because the beam doesn't spread out. Like a flashlight, the light is kind of going out in a big cone, and the further it goes out, the more dissipated that light energy becomes, and we would call that non-coherent light. So an LED, or a light-emitting diode, typically is not coherent. It's not all lined up, and so it will kind of broadcast out wide. And the further away you get from that light source, the less power it has. A laser does lose a little bit of power the further you get away from it, but not nearly as rapidly as an LED would. So in order to get the penetration force from an LED that you would with the laser, you often have to use more treatment time. So let me just summarize and say that not all devices are the same. It really comes down to what you're trying to do. Like, what is the therapeutic intention? And that's going to determine what type of laser or red light device you're going to want. For instance, in our office, we have a 50,000 milliwatt super pulsed laser with 3 different wavelengths, and it has a treatment area of about 2 centimeters squared. So that doesn't cover a lot of ground, but it's great for targeted treatment. Awesome for injured tissues, muscles, ligaments, tendons, that sort of thing. We also, though, have an entire full body system with over 5,000 LEDs. And each one of those LEDs is laid out in a, I'll even show you what this looks like. So this is a small pad, and there's 6 pads that wrap over the entire body. So now we're getting full body coverage, stimulating all of the cells in the skin, in the superficial fat tissue, stimulating mitochondria, stimulating circulation. That is used for, whole body effect. Fibromyalgia, chronic pain, but also things like depression, anxiety, peripheral neuropathy, skin, weight loss, right? So there are whole body applications that each one of those diodes is relatively weak compared to that 50,000 milliwatt system. But because it's spread over such a huge part of the body still gets an incredible amount of benefit from that therapy. So what about incorporating red light into your daily routine? That's an entirely different story. Now we've got to figure out how to get enough therapeutic benefit packed into something that's relatively affordable that people can use at home. Now, there are wall mounting systems that you can buy that you can stand in front of, and those go from $1,000 to $3,000, where you just kind of stand in front of the red light and maybe turn around and get different parts of your skin exposed. But the further you are away from that source, the weaker the light force is. So I have been on a search for quite a long time for something that was just in the sweet spot. It had enough therapeutic benefit to help with pain, to help with inflammation, but it was easy enough to apply. You could be relatively mobile with it, and the price point was right. So I just want to introduce you to one of our favorites, which is called the DNA Vibe. And this has 10 LED clusters with all the right frequencies of light that can be wrapped around an area of the body that's in pain, whether that's your neck or your shoulder or your lower back. And this can have some really beneficial effects on pain and inflammation as well. So there are some new devices that are out there, and this is under $300. And so more information available in the show notes in the links below to learn more about the DNA Vibe, and to also learn about coming in for therapy for our full body system or for our targeted laser treatment. Okay, so that's a lot of information. I want you to know that red light therapy, infrared light therapy, is very beneficial, but you do have to make sure that the light that you're using is powerful enough to do the job that you're wanting it to do. There are a ton of junky systems available for $100 on Amazon, and that's not what you want to be looking for. So we want to make sure that we're getting high quality, we're getting the right wavelength, we're getting the right power, we understand the right treatment time to get the right dose. Just like any other medicine, dosage matters, and that's the same with red light therapy. So there are a lot of parameters to look for. If you have questions about a specific device, or you want to learn more about red light therapy and how we use it in our clinic, or what you can be doing at home, feel free to reach out and respond to this podcast episode. Okay, so that's it for today. Your homework is to let your light shine and go out there and do something good in the world today.